In this episode of Ottawa Business Journal's Behind the Headlines, changes in the C-suite at Shopify, warmer weather heats up cottage sales, and the hype behind a made in Ottawa carbon capture technology. All this and more coming up right now. Behind the Headlines is brought to you by Nelligan Law, Ottawa's fierce, proven, and human law firm. Visit them at nelliganlaw.ca. Hello and welcome to Behind the Headlines for the week ending April 23rd, 2021. I'm Michael Curran from the Ottawa Business Journal. Behind the Headlines is a regular podcast from OBJ where we explore the most popular business stories. This episode marks the official start to our second season. Excited to be back with you and be bringing you these headlines. As usual, I'm joined by two of my colleagues at Ottawa Business Journal, Peter Kavesi and David Sally. Hello to you both. All right, let's get right into this with story number one, which is about Shopify. And Shopify's highest ranking executives are leaving the Ottawa-based e-commerce giant. Chief Talent Officer Brittany Forsyth, Chief Legal Officer Joe Frasca, and Chief Technology Officer Jean-Michel Lemieux are expected to end their lengthy tenures with the company in June. Dave, you broke the story and you've been covering Shopify for the better part of a decade. What is the legacy that these executives leave behind?
Well, Mike, it is quite a legacy, quite a lengthy legacy. All of these three have been at Shopify for a long time. Since back in the day when it was still in a little office in the Byward Market on York Street, and just this upstart e-commerce company that was going to arm the rebels, as they said. You know, Brittany Forsyth, for example, the Chief Talent Officer, she was employee number 22 at Shopify when she was hired in 2010. To put that in perspective, she now oversees a workforce of in the neighborhood of 7,000 people around the world. So she's been there almost right from the get-go and played just a massive role in building out Shopify's workforce, developing it into one of those companies that's just a powerhouse in terms of obviously its technology, but its employee commitment as well. Toby Lutke, the CEO, co-founder of Shopify, he really had high praise for Brittany, saying, some of his, all of his, in fact, earliest and fondest memories of Shopify involve Britt in some way, shape, or form. So that right there speaks volumes. Then, of course, you've got the Chief Legal Officer, Joe Frasca. He was the first lawyer Shopify ever hired in 2014, and as Toby called him, he is their first line and best line of defense. He builds out the legal culture there. Toby said we ask a lot from our lawyers, and he's always been there to when they needed it. And so again, huge. His contributions can't be overstated. And then. Finally, J.M. Lemieux, who, this is a guy who, has been at the company now for about 6 years. The VP of engineering. He worked at IBM before he came to Shopify. And now he's the chief technology officer. And you look at all the technology Shopify has rolled out over the last few years, whether it's, and we're not just talking about their e-commerce software that helps merchants build their sites. The Shopify has expanded into all kinds of areas in the last few years: mobile shopping apps, point of sale platforms, financial services products that let merchants pay their bills and track their expenses, all on the Shopify platform. JM has kind of been he's been the mastermind leading all those efforts. When he started, there were 54 developers at Shopify. There are now thousands of engineers around the world building Shopify's products out every day. He's the leader of that. So these are, three pillars of Shopify's leadership team, Mike, and their contributions to the company and the legacy they leave. It's almost immeasurable, and it will be big shoes to fill.
Yeah, in some ways, it seems like a bit of a end of an era, for some of these initial employees, especially with Brittany Forsyth. Peter, why do you think this story was so popular and got so much attention, and why is it so significant? I guess, Peter.
Well, it's really the context and specifically the timing. So, not to take anything away from Shopify's pre-pandemic growth and achievements and everything they built up over the decade prior to the arrival of COVID-19, but really the last 12 months have just been absolutely spectacular to watch Shopify. This huge rush to online shopping, both on the consumer side as well as all these retailers who haven't previously taken e-commerce as seriously until they were forced to close their doors and find alternative ways of connecting with customers, has just driven Shopify's revenue and share price. It just caused both to skyrocket. What's interesting, though, is that holding on to those gains and continuing that trajectory of growth is going to be a totally different story. We've seen many observers have suggested that it's going to be tough to continue to sign up merchants at the same pace as we've seen in recent months. And as well, there's also questions about, once vaccines are fully rolled out and once we are once again comfortable going into brick and mortar stores, how will that change the dynamics of e-commerce? So already we were sort of a bit of on the cusp of a new chapter in Shopify's history. Now suddenly, when you have this large void in Shopify's C-suite that will be filled by a new, I have no question, it's going to be filled by a new crop of very accomplished and exciting individuals to watch. This really does have the potential to be sort of a major inflection point in Shopify's corporate history.
That's great analysis. Thanks to both. Let's go to story number 2, which is about Ottawa-Gatineau's hot cottage market. At least I am, with this slightly warmer weather, looking forward to summer, and that means summer often means in the National Capital Region cottages. Our colleague Caroline Phillips took a closer look recently at the red hot cottage market, and we know that real estate across the board has been on the rise, but specifically, cottages are getting a lot of attention today. Peter, maybe explain some of the structural shifts that might be behind this hot cottage market.
There's a few, if you look beyond just those general trends that you mentioned, there's a few really interesting factors that play that suggest there might be a bit of a permanent shift happening when it comes to recreational properties. So just starting off on the demand side, a lot of these communities are about 4 to 5 hours from the Greater Toronto area. Traditionally, if you're sort of thinking that might be a little bit too far to drive if you're living in Toronto just to go up to the cottage for a weekend, if you then need to go back and work in an office in the GTA Monday to Friday. But with the pandemic and this widespread acceptance now of remote work, suddenly it's a lot more acceptable to maybe not be at your residence Monday to Friday and to be at the cottage for longer periods of time. And suddenly now that 4 to 5 hour drive, it's a lot easier to justify if you're going to be there for longer blocks of time. So the pool of prospective buyers has gotten much larger. Now, on the supply side, not unlike homes, here in Ottawa proper, there has been far fewer properties being brought to market, according to a lot of realtors that we spoke to. One of the factors behind that is that there's been a shift in the mentality of cottage owners, in that a lot more are holding on to their properties. They're looking at them as an investment rather than just a cottage, just a recreational property. And what that means is that they're looking at their cottages as an asset. They want to hold on to it in the anticipation that's going to appreciate in value, and as well as possibly be something that can be passed on, to their children as part of a nest egg, part of an inheritance on the financial side. So those are two trends that certainly it seems that could permanently change the recreational property real estate market in the region.
I completely get one of the points you brought up. So if a cottage was 2 to 3 hours away and you didn't want to do that for a shorter time period, in this post-pandemic world, maybe you spend Friday and Monday or something like that at the cottage. And if that drive seems a lot more tolerable if it's for a few days up there as opposed to 48 hours. So Makes a lot of sense. It'd be interesting to continue to watch this. So, Peter and Dave, before we explore the last story of the day, I want to bring in our legal expert from Nelligan Law, one of our sponsors. Jim Anstey is an associate lawyer in the employment law group at Nelligan. Welcome to you, Jim.
Hi, Michael. Thanks for having me.
Well, Jim, listen, the big news undoubtedly is this third wave. And, if you're like me, I'm feeling a little bit discouraged. Sometimes it seems like we're not making progress. But in fact, this week marked a milestone. Canada has now delivered 10 million doses of COVID-19 vaccine. So that's good news, Jim. However, the vaccination of people, including employees, does create some interesting employment law questions. So there are probably employers out there thinking, can there be restrictions on employees returning to the workplace if they're not vaccinated? Can you talk about that for a minute, Jim?
Absolutely, and you're right. This is a complex, novel legal issue. We haven't dealt with anything like this in over 100 years. The last pandemic was the Spanish flu, and our laws are just not designed to deal with these things. So when we had when we got the news about vaccines coming on board, we did start to get questions, even last December, from employers about whether they could mandate vaccines in the workplace and that sort of thing. The employment bar is not, we're not all on the same page about what employers can do here, but employers nonetheless need to know, what they can do. The advice that I've been giving is, mandating vaccines is probably not going to be upheld by a court. Rather, the better strategy is going to be to encourage your employees to get vaccines. And, in the case where employees say, no, I'm not going to get a vaccine, the best thing to do is probably education, refer them to, public health guidelines and that sort of thing. And then, of course, as an employer, you do have an obligation to, maintain the safety of your employees. So if some employees aren't getting vaccinated, there may be things that you want to do to, make sure your workplace is safe. For example, if you have another employee who can't get a vaccine, because of a religious reason or because of a health issue, then, you don't necessarily want to have that person come in contact with another person who's not vaccinated. So, while mandating vaccines may not fly, certainly outside of the healthcare sector or where you're taking care of vulnerable individuals, there are things that employers, I think, can do.
That's excellent advice. So I think what I heard from you, Jim, is you can't mandate it, but you can encourage it. And if someone isn't vaccinated and returning to the office, you might want to create a little bit of physical distance between them and unvaccinated employees. Did I get that right?
Well, exactly. I mean, we just don't have the laws in place to tell us exactly what to do. And to be fair, I mean, this is an evolving situation. And the advice I give to employers a lot is, follow what public health is telling us to do. They're the experts. If any of this ever gets challenged in court or with an arbitrator, what public health is telling us to do is going to be what the court or the arbitrator considers.
Well, that's great advice. Thank you, Jim, for being with us and providing that great legal advice, and continued strength to you and your colleagues at Nelligan. Thanks very much.
My pleasure. Thank you.
So let's go to our third and final story of the episode. This story is about a company called Hyperion, and they've landed $2 million in seed round to build out a carbon capture system. And Dave, I'm going to go to you on this. You recently took a closer look at the clean tech firm that landed a couple $1 million, as indicated. Hyperion Global Energy has a technology that collects carbon dioxide from factory smokestacks and turns it into materials to be used in consumer products. Obviously, carbon capture, Dave, is a super important technology to have. But what's all the hype around Hyperion, Dave?
Well, Mike, as you say, there is some growing hype around Hyperion. It is for a company that hasn't been around all that long, it's really starting to make some waves. And once you kind of dig under the hood a little bit, open up the hood and find out what's going on here, you can see why. Their slogan kind of is, "We turn dirty air into dollars," and right away that's going to turn some investors' heads and grab the attention of people in the not only in the clean tech community but outside it as well, because Hyperion's technology, this ability to collect all these greenhouse gases, the CO2, that's that has become obviously a growing issue every year with global warming. And the fact that they've discovered a way to be able to take this stuff and turn it into something that people want to buy is really, in a sense, the holy grail almost of this sort of technology. This is what people have been trying to do for years: figure out how we can make it, how we can make the market excited about this carbon capture technology. They seem to have figured out a way. What they end up doing, their technology, is it turns carbon dioxide into materials such as, one of them be calcium carbonate, which is it's a compound that you find in all kinds of things, everything from toothpaste to cement, other green building materials, paint, even animal feed. All of this stuff has calcium carbonate in it. This is a multi-billion-dollar market. So if you can turn carbon dioxide, a greenhouse gas that's contributing heavily to global warming, and turn it into a product like this that can be used across a whole range of industries, well, you're really onto something. And that's what Hyperion says it's done. It's now part of it's actually part of a new accelerator that includes just 10 companies from around the world who are building out clean tech solutions, and it's attracted the support of the Capital Angel Network, which gave it its biggest investment ever, $800,000 in its new seed round. Companies like Enbridge and Shell are contributing to it. So I mean, when you get names like that on board, you must be onto something, and they really feel like they really are onto something, and they're not the only kind of Ottawa-based firm that's involved in this. There's a company called Planetary Hydrogen in town here as well that's working on its own carbon capture technology, and it's going to take all kinds of solutions. It's not just going to be one thing to crack this code, so to speak. Hyperion's co-founder Heather Ward, she put it really well. She said there's not going to be one silver bullet to solving the carbon emissions problem. It's going to take a whole bunch of companies working, kind of competing, but also working together in a sense to help this sector grow and fulfill its potential. And Ottawa looks like it's going to play a really big part in that, Mike. And that's really exciting. I think for the future of clean tech here in Ottawa, that we can be playing such a central role in an emerging industry like this.
It reminds me of the federal budget, of course, had all sorts of green energy programs. So wouldn't be surprised, to see some of those Ottawa companies benefiting for that. Well, thanks for all that, Dave. And Peter, before we wrap up here, I want to give you a second to talk about OBJ's quarterly news magazine that hit the streets just a few days ago. It's a big, thick 80-page paper, the biggest, we think, in a decade or more. So that's quite a milestone for OBJ. But what's inside that issue, Peter?
So our cover story is our annual list of Ottawa's fastest growing companies. This is an annual feature that we've done for quite a long time. Not only is the paper a record size, I'm pretty sure that we receive a record number of applicants this year. And what really struck us about our list of the top 10 fastest growing companies is that historically tech companies really dominated the list, and usually there'd be one or two non-tech firms. This year, the diversity of companies that made the list is just remarkable. There's last mile delivery service, a distillery, a skincare products, as well as some software firms. So it's really, really encouraging just to show the diversity and strength of Ottawa's economy. There's several other great special sections in the news magazine. Our quarterly regional coverage takes a look at how rural tourism operators are reinventing their offerings in an era of COVID-19, and our special HR update section as well takes a special look at remote hiring. And I will just say one of my favorite features in the news magazine is Ron Corbett's feature. Of course, we know that it's been a constant theme in our discussions that the pandemic has affected different businesses, different sectors in different ways. One of the arguably hardest hit sectors have been retailers, specifically here in Ottawa in the downtown core. There's an entire subsector of the retail industry that really is positioned to serve all those thousands upon thousands of workers who traditionally filled all those office towers. So Ron literally went for a walk through some very empty downtown Ottawa streets and spoke to them to understand what their reality is like and really what the outlook is for them. So please, if you can't get your hands on a print copy because you're at home, go to obj.ca, just scroll to the bottom of the footer and you'll see the little thumbnail there. And of course, the other thing I want to mention, Mike, you alluded to the federal budget. You helped to organize our post-budget breakfast. It's been a very busy spring for events. But what else is happening? What are you and the Ottawa Board of Trade working on that's on the horizon as far as events go?
Thanks for the question. We've got a big event, a virtual conference. First time we've done a virtual conference. We've done lots of virtual events, and we're embracing a new platform that kind of looks like you're walking around actually in a conference hall. So it's kind of cool. Anyway, the conference is called the City Building Summit. It's the second time we've done it, and it's I find a really interesting vision behind this because it's really bringing together land developers, architects, municipal officials from the city, NCC, engineering firms, so on and so forth. And it's a wide-ranging discussion about the future of Ottawa, not only from a land development point of view, by the way, but from a social perspective. We have a celebrated urban planner, Jennifer Keesmaat, coming to us virtually, of course, from Vancouver. So she'll be the keynote kicking it off. And that's coming up again on Friday, April 30th. So it's just around the corner. Still tickets left, by the way, and we've got strong interest. So thanks for that question. We'll have a mayor's breakfast, by the way, speaking with Cameron Love. Mark Sutcliffe from one of our colleagues at the Ottawa Business Journal will be speaking to the CEO of Ottawa Hospital just coming up on the 29th of April. So listen, guys, that brings us to the end of this episode. A reminder that this podcast can be watched or listened to in various ways. If you like the visual medium, then tune into this YouTube channel. Be sure to follow and like. If you prefer audio format, then you can listen to us on all popular podcast platforms such as Spotify, Apple, SoundCloud, and Twitch. I encourage you, if you're a hardcore local business news junkie like us, visit obj.ca throughout your workday for the very latest in local business news. And if you don't want to miss any headlines, then the thing to do is to subscribe to OBJ Today email newsletter sent every weekday, Monday to Friday in the late afternoon, early evening. And you can go to obj.ca newsletter/sign up. That's going to be on screen for you. On behalf of my colleagues, Peter and Dave, thanks for tuning in today. Please stay connected to OBJ and also stay healthy. Bye-bye. Behind the Headlines is brought to you by Nelligan Law, Ottawa's fierce, proven, and human law firm. Visit them at nelliganlaw.ca.